Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's Cathedra webinar. We are coming to you live on July 31st, 2025. If any of you are NLC webinar first timers in the room, know that our Cathedra webinars get their name from the Greek word for learning. And today you're going to be learning Grant Writing 101, how to write a competitive fundable grant, from who we lovingly call the goddess of grants herself, Diane Leonard. She is the president of DH Leonard Consulting and Grant Writing Services, LLC. My name is Brooke Warrington. I'm the Training and Development Specialist here at the Native Learning Center. We're also thrilled that all of you are on the webinar today. Very exciting. If you could follow along while I read the disclaimer aloud. This webinar provides a summary of fundamental concepts, requirements, and/or procedures within the allotted 90 minutes. The material discussed does not illustrate all possible scenarios that could be applicable. We also have our copyright infringement law printed here. So this is just a friendly reminder that the webinar materials are protected by copyright, trademark, trade secret, as well as other intellectual property laws. If you are a new person on the platform, know that all of our courses and past webinars that we've hosted here for the last almost year can be found in the courses section. You can find downloadable PDFs for slides, as well as webinar recordings. And this is a completely free resource to you, so we encourage you to check it out and explore. And when you join in the future for a webinar while it's happening, know that you'll just log in like you did today, and you'll click on that green banner to join. We ask that you we ask that you join with listen-only capabilities because it just helps to cut down on audio feedback. But if you joined with your mic on, not a problem, you can always just mute. And if you're noticing that my voice is coming out of the wrong device, maybe you're trying to use your headphones, maybe you have a Bluetooth speaker, anything like that. If you come down to the little telephone icon that's at the bottom of your screen, if you click on it, it'll pull up a list of all your mic and speaker devices, and you can select the proper audio output that you want to use. We do, of course, encourage class participation. We want to hear those comments. We want to know your questions. And we are going to primarily rely on the public chat today. So if you don't yet have that open, you can go to the left-hand side of your screen in that messages panel, and you'll click on public chat. You see me circling it right now on the screen. Once you open that up, if you want to ask a question, make a comment, certainly if you have any tech support issues that I can help you navigate through, just come down to the box where it says send message to public chat, click on that, type in what you want to say, and then you can hit enter, or you can click on the cute little paper airplane button, and that'll send it in where we all can see it. Just below the public chat, you can also open up the shared notes section. In the shared notes, I've included a helpful list of links for you, like today's webinar feedback survey, a link to today's slides. The slides are also in the chat for you too. We have our YouTube webinar archive linked there. We also have a link for what you can bookmark so that you can log in quickly in the future. And then again, if you joined with your mic on, no worries. You can always just mute by clicking on the little mic icon down at the bottom of your screen. And if along the way you feel like maybe we missed a question or we missed a comment, you could always utilize the hand raise feature that's all the way to the right-hand side of the screen. Okay, so we of course want to know who's on the webinar. It's really nice to see who's joining us today. So if y'all could take a moment to open up the public chat now and introduce yourselves to us. You could let us know your name, where you're tuning in from. It's always really fun to see all the different tribal nations that are represented on the webinar. Your work or your role in Indian country. Maybe it led you to the webinar. Maybe this is for personal use. All of the above is great. And then your tribal affiliation. If you have one, you might be a tribal employee and not have your own tribal affiliation. That's okay too. We're also happy to have you. And while y'all are introducing yourselves in the chat, I just have a quick final note. You have a red menu panel all the way to the far left-hand side of your screen. Yours might not say the words. Yours might just be those little icons. But I do want to advise to try to avoid clicking on that in the webinar, because if you do, it is going to immediately pull you out and it's going to take you to whatever you selected on the menu. If it happens, not a big deal. You can always just click on the green banner once again to come back in. But I did just want to give you that notice that if you click on it, it's going to pull you out immediately. All right, y'all. While you are introducing yourselves in the chat, it is with great pleasure that I introduce your webinar instructor, Diane Leonard, again, Goddess of Grants. And Diane, I have made you presenter now. Diane, I'm not sure if it's just me. I don't hear any sound coming out right now. Folks, let me know in the chat if you're able to hear. Maybe it's just a problem on my end. Okay, yeah, it's not just me, Diane. We can't hear you. I'll let you know once your voice is coming out. Not yet. Still no sound. Give us just one second to navigate this, folks. Thank you so much for chiming in the chat, though. I appreciate y'all.
This is what happens when you go old school, Brooke. I click the mute button.
Okay, coming through loud and clear now, Diane. Thank you so much.
Folks, sometimes we work so hard beforehand to deal with all our tech gremlins that I go old school and I wear my headset from like a few years ago, and then I push the mute button. Thank you so much for your patience. See, we make jokes about not letting grants stress you out, but I make no promises about the tech. Absolutely no promises about the tech. I can only promise things about grant-related skills. Brooke and everyone else, thanks for helping to make sure that we knew you couldn't hear me. But now here we are. For Grant Writing 101, how to write a competitive, fundable grant. Note that I did not say how to guarantee that you win a grant. If anyone figures that out, I will pass the fancy headset over to you. There's no such thing as a guarantee when we write a grant application that it will be funded. I say that with all sorts of years of experience, as noted on the bio slide on your screen right now. I have spent my entire career in not just the nonprofit sector, but in the grant-related space. So first, I was a grant maker. I was the program officer for the Michigan Women's Foundation, so I was managing the awarding of grant funds, both the small mini grants and the larger social impact grants, and working with organizations of all shapes and sizes around the state of Michigan. Then I moved to the grant seeking side with the intent of trying to reduce the stress that grant was causing for organizations, whether it was during the application stage, like we'll talk about today, or during the post-award phase, so when implementing and reporting back to a funder. So my team and I were literally doing this type of work every single day as well. In fact, we were just in a call earlier talking about a portal that was just being a little clunky in terms of what was trying to be entered before it would be submitted. So literally, my day-to-day work with the team as well, not just a theoretical thing we'll talk about today. And as I see you sharing where it is that you're joining us from today, I would love to ask of you a second check-in question in the public chat, if you don't mind, please. There is no right or wrong answer, and there is no judgment in your answer, but could you please let me know on a scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable? 1, I'm learning for the first time today, maybe it's almost a 0.5, just learning about grants. 10, I love grants, but I'm always looking for new tips and tricks. If you could let me know on that scale of 1 to 10, how you would rate your current comfort as it relates to grants. Again, no judgment in your answer. I just want to get a sense of who's here in the room. If you have a must answer type question that you brought to the session today, especially for folks who are really new to this learning, there's something you really want to get answered. I love to see those in the public chat now, because that will ensure that I answer them during the course of my slides and also look at them before we wrap up. So I would love to see in the public chat, now that I know your self-reported rating related to comfort level, I would also love to see if you've got like a must answer question that you're hoping to get the answer to in today's time. Please also feel free to type that into the public chat while I finish getting us started today. Now, the thing that I love the most, well, you could say it's coffee. I mean, it's on the bio slide. You could say it's running. I did have a lovely 5K run this morning before it drizzled. I did both those things today, but what I really love is talking about the impact of the dollars once secured and that they create in communities. That's why we're all here. We want to get the grant money that helps our communities do great things, address problems, address needs, create change. To look at a grant application, You might look at 5 applications in the next few months, and all 5 will probably be just a little different. There's a different reason that they were released. There is a different process by which you apply. There's a different timeline by which you will find out if you got funded or not. Each grant is unique. I'm not sure if that's going to be a little bit of a reality check. You were hoping to get one template and run with it, but that's the truth. Each one is unique because each funder is unique. So today, to help you feel a little more knowledgeable, whether you're starting as a 1 or a 3 or an 8, to help move you a little bit further up that self-reported comfort scale, I want us to talk about what are the key elements in a grant application. I want to talk about storytelling within grants. I want to look with a little bit of a finer point, a little bit of a zoomed in lens on the need statement and our objectives related to our program or project we're putting forward. I absolutely want to talk about budget. I know you might not be the person in charge of finance, but we're going to talk about budget. It's part of our story. And yes, I will at the end ask if there are any outstanding questions, but I'm watching the public chat all the time. So if you type in one of your must get answered questions, I'll be watching and I'll be thinking about where I can answer it. If you ask a question while I'm on a particular slide, could you repeat that? Could you dig a little deeper on that point? Help us understand, give us a little more context. I'm watching and I will answer as we go. So our big goal for our time together today, I want to cover basic foundational knowledge as you think about what it means to craft a grant application. There's going to be different puzzle pieces required for each and every application. So how for each nuanced application that you consider applying for, how can you make it as competitive and as successful as possible? The way to think about it, I want you to play your own game. I want you and your specific tribal organization, your specific department, your specific part of the community to make your application as competitive as possible. And yes, you might be competing against some of the other awesome people in this room today, but we can only control what we do for ourselves, for our organization. So think about what will make your application the strongest one you possibly can for yourselves. On the screen is the highest level, biggest, broadest overview that I can give you related to grants. And so I want to walk you through it. For those of you who are a little more comfortable, a little more experienced with grants, especially if you have been in one of the grant writing webinars I've done here with the Native Learning Center, you may have seen this image before. It's in many of my slide decks because it shows us our 5 basic best practices. We're going to walk through this image and we're going to approach it as we would a clock on the wall. So we're going to start at that 12 o'clock, that noon position. The grant life cycle, some people refer to it as the 5 R's of grant writing. Both work. But what we're thinking about are the ongoing best practices in our work. And so as we start at that 12 o'clock position, we're thinking about readiness. Readiness, grant readiness is, are you eligible? Do you have the basic systems in place in order to be eligible, in order to be awarded, in order to implement and report? Readiness looks different for foundation grants versus maybe city or state grants, and definitely different than federal grants. As I gave those examples, the readiness level of effort got harder. It is hardest to be ready for federal grants. They have the highest standard of what must be done and accomplished before you can even click on the apply button. So being grant ready, thinking about that basic best practice that's at the top of our grant lifecycle image, that's saying, did we ensure that we are eligible and that we could open up almost any portal and either register for the first time or log in and click apply? Could we get there? That's what readiness is about. As we move clockwise around our grant lifecycle image, we come to our second item, which is grant research. Grant research is about finding the grant funder or the grant opportunity within a funder you already know about that is the perfect fit for you. It might not be a perfect fit for the person sitting next to you in this digital room, but it is a perfect fit for you. And it could be perfect for a variety of reasons. It could be perfect because we're thinking about our goals, our budgetary needs, and my goodness, how well that opportunity aligns with our needs. Might be like it was made just for us. It could be that it's a perfect fit because there are geographic restrictions for where the funding can be awarded, and we, as the applicant, are right in that community. There are lots of different reasons why it could be perfect. There will be times when you learn about an opportunity or about a funder, and it doesn't feel so perfect. It feels like it's a bit of a stretch. It's a bit of a reach. We're reaching to try and see if they read our application, they might think that we're so awesome that they should make an exception to their rules. We don't want to spend our time and energy on those things that are reaches. We want to try to find those that are the best fit for us, because you don't have enough time to apply to all the funding opportunities that exist. We want to spend your time applying for those that are the best fit. So when we're in the research portion of our grant life cycle, we're going and assessing our best fit based on what's on paper. Well, okay, you're right. Or based on what's online. So digitally, what's available to us. There's a second thing that we can do, though, to try and judge what is the best fit for us. And it's before we ever sit down to start writing. 3 of our grant life cycle items take place before we start writing an application, because we had to think about, were we ready? Are we technically eligible? Do we have the things in place? Then we could worry about our research and learn about opportunities. The third thing we need to do before we sit down to even craft our first sentence in a grant application is to think about if we can have a conversation, if we can have an email exchange, if we can do anything to have contact and start to build a relationship with a grant maker. Email exchanges with the grant makers count as the very first beginning of having a relationship with a grant maker. Having a phone call with a grant maker, oh, isn't that amazing if you're able to actually speak to someone on the phone before you apply. Seeing them in person and talking to them at a conference, oh, absolutely, that sets my heart aflutter. It would make me so happy if that was what happened, because that's a higher level of relationship building exchange. But again, email is a great place to start. And so that bucket of relationship building, it starts early on in the grant life cycle, but will now, once you start, always be something for you to consider. Where might we run into a grant maker? Where might we have exchanges with them? Where might we interact? You don't have to have a 10 out of 10 relationship with a grant maker to apply for a grant. But trying to establish any relationship, have any contact, get to ask any clarifying questions with the grant makers is a best practice, because those conversations give you pieces of information that make you more competitive. There is no disagreement in the grant seeking community. There is no disagreement from grant makers. Having a conversation, having an email exchange, getting questions answered with a grant maker will make your application more competitive. Not because they're going to give you extra favor in the process, but because you learn things through your exchange that make your actual application more competitive compared to application A over here or application C over here. We will always learn something from interacting with a grant maker that will make all of our writing work more competitive. So once we do those first 3 R's, yes, we made it. We got to grant writing. It's the 4th of the 5 R's. I make a really big deal. It's red on your screen. It is where you will spend the majority of your time. But grant writing as a phrase describing our work is actually a bit misleading because there is so much that has to happen around the writing work for our writing to be as competitive as possible. How many of you are surprised by that? Candid answer in the public chat, please. Y for yes and for no. How many of you are surprised by how much emphasis I'm putting on all these things aside from writing? If you're not surprised, I'm okay with that too. But I just wanted to check in because sometimes folks are like, really? I thought I just, air quotes, got to write the grant. So for those of you who are new to grants, maybe gave one of the lower ratings, but weren't surprised by that, I'm super excited for you. You know that there's more to this work than filling out the responses, writing a character counted response, writing a word counted response. That's amazing. Now there is, you're right, one last R. We're going to spend the rest of our session in the writing best practice, in that fourth R in our grant life cycle. I'm going to assume that you have already done, I don't like to assume things, but I'm going to assume that you've already fully addressed readiness, research, and relationships. And if you're saying, wait a second, I need to learn more there, please refer to all of the awesome recordings, especially, I mean, I'm a little biased, but I know for a fact that I've got a lot that are in the Native Learning Center recordings. Or check out some of the things that are forthcoming in the next few weeks, because I know we've got some of those topics on our calendar coming up. So if you need more support around readiness, research, and relationships, please check out the recordings or come to one of our very soon upcoming sessions that'll cover those. But so today we're going to spend our time in writing. And what I'm hoping is going to happen for you, what I feel confident with a little focused effort can happen for you, is that you'll get a grant award. I love getting grant awards, and I'm guessing you do too, and probably your colleagues as well. Our team likes to celebrate by ringing this yellow dingy bell or using like the dingy bell emoji in our chat channel or in email. It's just a teeny tiny little way to celebrate the award. We make big noises and get excited, maybe have offline dance parties, but at a minimum, ring that yellow dingy bell. And so I want you to celebrate your awards. And then think about the real work of implementing the grant funding and what it looks like to report to the grant maker, to be a great grantee with your financial reports, with your programmatic reports, because you want to get money from that organization again. You want your grant life cycle to start all over again. That's why it's a cycle. It never has to stop unless you want it to stop. You want to maintain these great relationships with grant makers so that grant funding can be a sustainable part of your organization's revenue. So we're going to look at writing in deep detail. Now, as we think about this big image on the screen, Kenny put a great big want to have it answered type question, or more of a statement, but I want to turn it into a question for everyone in the public chat. Kenny said, the part that's most difficult at times is getting the program manager to implement services with the know-how of CFR, along with other guidelines that are more of like a common sense knowledge for the grant writers. So the folks like us, like you. And so Kenny's point is a really important one because it's not about the writing work that Kenny's acknowledging here. It's about the reporting work. It's about the implementation. And so there's a little bit of jargon in there. So the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations, that Code of Federal Regulations, the fact that Kenny's referencing it, is talking about federal grant funding. And there are some, as you can imagine, some really strict rules on how do you go about meeting the requirements of the federal agency or department that you have received funding through. So understanding what those guidelines are, it's one thing for us to know that when we're applying. It is another thing, an incredibly important other thing, for those who will be doing the implementation work, those who will be helping to spend the money, those who will be doing the project or program or services work, to understand what are the rules, what are the guardrails, what are the things that we must do in order to be a great grantee so we can start all over. It's the connection between our pre-award work and our post-award work. I'm really glad you brought that up, Kenny. Thank you so much, because that really helps to illustrate how important, once we get the money, the work of your colleagues is. You might say, I thought the hard work was getting the application done and funded. It's a lot of hard work to implement and maintain grant funding. And so it's actually why we talk about wanting to have a grant team. When you think about the application, we're going to look at the common elements that we are going to use and we're going to see when applying for grant funding. When we think about these applications, we could, you and I, any one of us, could try to complete the application on our own. And technically, many of us probably could. It might not always be easy. Now, in fact, it'll never be easy, but it might be possible. Might have some late nights, might have some extra coffee, but it could be possible. Will it be the most competitive application possible, though? Unlikely. Will it understand and demonstrate knowledge of the nuances that your awesome colleagues who will be helping to implement? Will it demonstrate that knowledge? Probably not. So as we think about our different application elements, to help make sure that it is competitive as possible, the pre-award application, and as feasible as possible to implement well with fidelity so that you could potentially be a grantee again in the future, we want to have colleagues help us with our application. We want to have colleagues in finance. We want to have other colleagues in operations, maybe in IT or in people resources. We want to have people in the programs and projects in the application discussions with us. We can still do the writing, the majority or all of the writing, but we want to have colleagues at the table with us. So as I'm walking through these ideas of how we're going to craft our first application, I want you to also be thinking about who are you going to invite to be part of this process. If you want to type their title or their initials, maybe you'll have multiple initials and multiple titles, but who is at least one person that you think you're going to invite to be part of a grant application when you get started? Again, you might do the majority or all of the writing, but who's going to help provide information? Who's going to provide some feedback on what you're crafting? Go ahead and type the title or titles or their initials into that public chat for me. We won't know all the details, so there's no judgment, but I want you thinking about who's going to help. So when you think about that first application, or maybe for some of you, the next application you pick up, maybe it's not your first, but the application that you pick up, I want you to stop and think about, what type of grant maker is this? And there's two options for your answer. Answer one could be government. Some government agency or department is who you're going to apply to for grant funding. Option two is that you could be thinking about foundations. It could be a corporate foundation, a private foundation, a public foundation, a family foundation. It's an IRS tax entity that grants money out of their savings endowment. So there's a bunch of different structures, but a foundation is a nice bucket way to talk about it. So we could have a government path or we could have a foundation path. Why would it matter? Thanks for asking. Here's why it would matter. If it's government funding and you're trying to decide, how am I going to put forward our story? What am I going to say in this application? I want you thinking about, how does your work connect to the government policy that has brought about this opportunity for you? What is the big, broad health-related policy? What is the big, broad education policy? What is the big, broad environmental policy that is bringing about the funding opportunity that you intend to apply for? Who you are as a tribal organization isn't going to change. What you want to do is not going to change, but the way you might talk about it to a government funding agency or department may sound different because you're trying to think about, how do I connect the dots from here to here for how this will influence policy? How does this relate to those big, broad goals? On the other hand, foundations, that second path, again, whether family foundation, corporate foundation, public foundation, what you're thinking about, who you are as a tribal organization, what you want to do, how you want to do it, stays the same. I don't want you changing who you are and what you want to do based on the funder you're looking at. But the way you tell this story will be more about connecting the dots from here to here about how your organization, your tribal organization, your community area, how does your goal, how does your mission, how does your vision align with the mission and or vision of the foundation? Not changing who you are and what you want to do on a big scale. We're not creating new things just to go after grant funding. I want you doing the things that are priorities for you. I want you telling your story in a different way, depending on if it's the government path or the foundation path. Now, you know what would be really helpful for me is if I knew what is the number one thing that you need to find grant funding for right now. If I said to you today, hey, there's this great application and you're eligible, and they said you can apply for anything you want, anything at all. What is that anything? Please go ahead and type into the public chat, what is the number one thing that you need to find grant funding for right now? Maybe it's meals for seniors in the community. Maybe it's infrastructure in the community. Maybe it's back to school supplies already. My goodness, summer goes so fast. So maybe you're thinking about back to school supplies for programs. No right or wrong answer, but I want to get a sense, because I know there's a lot of variation in terms of the work that you're doing and why you're here. So what is the number one thing that you would want to apply for, that you need to get funded? All right, historical preservation, transportation, a wellness center, accessible housing, infrastructure, court services, equipment, infrastructure and environmental repair, emergency services, disaster response. Whew, I was right. Incredibly wide and varied answers. Awesome. That's fantastic. There's funding for all those things. Takes a little bit of work to find it. But there are funding opportunities that could fit everything you've listed. Now, when we find the opportunity, because you're going to spend your time doing your research, when you find the great opportunity, you're super excited about it, what might that application look like? Well, it depends. And so for as many of you as answered in the public chat, there could be that many different application structures that we would expect to see. And it's up to the grant maker to decide what is the right amount of information, what is the right format, what is the right online portal or not, that they want to use to gather the application so that they can make a judgment on, you are the best one to get our funding investment, or you are the best one to get our funding investment. So it is at the discretion of the grant maker, whether government or foundation. Sometimes there are a few rules they need to follow, especially on the government side. So you might see some similar structure or some similar portals, but the content of what is being asked, how many words, how many pages, again, at the discretion of the grant maker. I have written federal grants that were 10 pages in narrative length, single-spaced. I have written federal grants that were 75 pages, double-spaced. Why? Right? Both for similar amounts of money. It's at the discretion of the grant maker, and also what are the attachments around it that help them to understand what it is that you plan to do. So you have to be ready for each application to look a little different. So once you understand what type of grant maker you're looking at, that was our first step. Is it government or foundation? So you have in your head, I want to think more like, how do I connect to the policy that created this funding? Or how does our mission for this work relate to the mission of the foundation? Second step is, what does it look like to apply? What do they want from me? What do they want from us? On the screen right now is a list of the very common grant application elements that we see grant makers asking for. They might ask for 2 of these. They might ask for 5 of these. They might ask for all of these. Again, it is at their discretion. When we think about what these application elements mean, I'm going to zoom in on a few of these in particular today. We're going to dig a little bit deeper on them, but let me give you a quick high-level overview of what they are. A cover letter. It's a throwback in the language to the days when we used to mail applications in. Well, maybe not like actually mail them. It was more like go to FedEx and ensure that it had tracking and you knew what date it was going to be there for sure. But we literally used to mail binders into grant makers so that they could read and review and make grant awards. But we still see the request or the need for cover letters in some online applications. Sometimes they specifically request it. Sometimes it's the body of the email that you might send with the application. A cover letter is letting the grant maker know that you are requesting funding for a specific project or program, and you're asking them for how much money. I've got a quick why for yes and for no question for you. If you were looking for a new job and you were applying to new jobs, I'm not saying you are, but if you were, theoretical situation, if you were looking for a new job, would you customize your cover letter for each employer for why you think you're a good fit? Why for yes and for no in the public chat, please. Why for yes and for no. Would you customize a cover letter if you were applying for a new job? Oh, wow, that was really rapid in the public chat. I mean, that feels pretty unanimous. Why? Why are so many of you so certain that you customize a cover letter related to a new job opportunity? Can somebody give me a few words, quick phrases? Why do you all agree that we would customize our cover letter for our employment opportunity? Gwendolyn, fast typing. Thank you. Every job is unique. Please take that phrase and remember that, all of you, when it comes to grants. Every grant is unique. There should be nothing that you put forward that is the template. Nothing. You can have a narrative library that you draw from, you learn from. You think about, I wrote this before and it was 2 pages. I wonder how I might expand on that to make it 5. But we're not going to take anything, even a cover letter, and only change maybe the address block, or in the body of our email, only change the name of the grant maker. Grant makers can spot that a mile away. Each grant is unique. Just like Gwendolyn said, every job is unique. So even things as small as a cover letter, seemingly small, I should say, please be sure that you're customizing to each grant maker. How is what you are creating different for them? Keep that in mind for every single item on this application list on your screen. Your executive summary is an executive summary. Could be a paragraph that they give you. It might be a whole page, discretion of the grant maker. Your project abstract might be what they call it instead. But that is a unique statement about why your project should be funded by them. It has to be unique to the grant maker. It's not a general statement about how awesome your project or program idea is. And it is, don't get me wrong, but it has to be specific to the grant maker that you're applying to. People say, but Diane, needs statement, program description, evaluation, organizational capacity, budget. Those are the meat of the application, but you told us that our work doesn't change for the grant maker. So why would I customize those? How would I customize those? Such a great question. And I know some of you were thinking it, so that's why I had to pose it that way. You're right. Don't change who you are and what you're doing for the grant maker. But as you're telling the story, as you're writing about it, think about, why does this grant maker care? You might have grant maker A that cares about, we'll make it senior services, and specifically meals delivered so that folks can have healthy, nutritious meals delivered to their home environment. And so you might have funder A that's willing to consider funding that idea, and you might have funder B that's also willing to consider that idea, but their motivations for why could be completely different. So to both funders, we would talk about what the program looks like, what sort of metrics we're talking about, how many people in the community, why is this so important? But maybe one was a government funder and one was a foundation funder. And so the government funder might want to ensure that we're providing these services to elders and seniors in our community as a way that actually we're ensuring that we've got a really nice kind of wraparound health services available, that we're supporting the existence of home-based services, trying to keep people from maybe having to go into long-term care. There's some policy goals related to that. On the foundation side, it could be someone in your own region that is really focused on providing the highest quality of life for individuals in the community. Your program sounds like and fits both of those. But the way you would tell the story and engage the reader in either of those is just a little nuanced. So therefore, need statement, program description, evaluation, organizational capacity, and budget all can be tweaked to tell the story that's best for that funder, not template. Think about the language on the funder's website. Think about the language in their guidelines. How do you bring that language into your application? That's the place I'd encourage you to start. Attachments. You're right. Attachments are often standard. Proof of tax exemption, your annual financials, your last quarter's financials. Yes, your staff list, your org chart. You're right, we don't change those. But attachments also include things like work plans or logic models, CVs and resumes. So there could be some customization around our attachments, but you're right, probably less customization happening in those attachments. But the big important rule to follow, please, with attachments is that only provide the grantmaker what they asked for. Grantmaker A might ask you for 4 attachments. Grantmaker B might ask you for 8. And you might say, but I have these other 4, so why don't I give them to this other funder here? No, don't disrespect their process. Don't make it more stressful for them to process your application. Only give them the application attachments that they have requested. If you have more great things that you want to give them or you want to offer them, make it an offer within the application or within your cover letter or in an email. We also have some news clippings about the program, or we also have a logic model. If you would like to see it, we'd be happy to provide it. Let them know the other things you have, but please do not force them on the grantmaker. It makes their review process more stressful for them to work through. So we find our grant instructions that tell us what do we have to do to apply. How many of you are on the line? Over 40 right now. Let's pretend that there are over 40 different grant applications that are being opened tomorrow. It could happen, right? It could be how you want to spend your Friday. You open a new grant application and you're thinking about how you're going to come in next week and dig right in on the drafting. And I've just told you each one's going to be unique. So we're going to have 40 different ways we're thinking about preparing an application. Good news. I will tell you that even if there were 40 different grant applications being opened, there are 3 things that I'm going to say guarantee you, will help make your application stronger, more competitive, more successful, regardless of what the structure looks like. Those 3 things are on the screen for you right now. Clear identification of the need or problem that your work will address. 2, SMART objectives. SMART is an acronym. I will explain it for you in just a moment. And 3 is measurement plan. What does success look like? How will you know that you achieved that success? Clear identification of need, SMART objectives, measurement plan, definition of success. Those 3 things. If in 6 months, all of us reconvened here and I said, hey, show me which applications have been funded from that very first day after class, and let's take a look at what is consistent in all of those funded applications. I want to find these 3 things. This is what helps funders feel confident that they are making the best investment by selecting your application. So the need statement is where you are laying out in the rest of the application, awesome grant maker. We're going to talk about how we're going to take some actions, we're going to create some impact, we're going to reach a solution. I'm laying the groundwork for you here. This is the need in our community that we are the absolute best to address, or this is the problem that we are facing. Here's why we need your funding related to our infrastructure. Here's why we need your funding related to education in our community. This is what's going on. Here's the current status quo. That's what your need statement is going to help the grant maker understand. To do that, you're right. Data, 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 probably some more data. But you might only have a little bit of space to write it. You might, or maybe you're going to have a few pages. When you think about the statistics, the data, the reports that are available to back up why your work is important, why it is needed, in the public chat, could you let me know what would be your favorite citable source? What do you think you are most likely to use to prove your point? Why is this needed? Maybe I'm thinking in New York State, there's school report cards that get published about each school district, and in it, you've got test scores and free and reduced lunch eligibility rates, a bunch of information. So somebody in education might say, oh, my school report card. Others might say, oh, it's the Census American Community Survey results. That's going to likely be my go-to. Somebody might say Department of Labor and their data. Somebody might say the Annie E. Casey Foundation Kids Count Data Book. Comes out annually. Fantastic data source. Okay, a lot of you are saying census. Yeah, but what is the best data point that helps to tell your story? You might have, I used to have like an actual manila folder where I would keep all my printed reports. Remember, I've been doing this for a really long time. But now I have manila folders online. I still love that they look like a little file folder, but I keep all my digital files and I've got just piles of reports. Every article I read, I'm like, oh, that's a good one. I keep it indexed with an Excel sheet so that I remember what I have and I don't have to go read all the PDFs related to the program again. I can quick look at my little catalog of what we've saved. Not every piece of data in that digital folder is going to be used in every application. And depending on what funder I look at, I might pick maybe I've got my 8 favorites. Maybe I'm going to use 4 of my favorites for funder A, and I'm going to use 2 of those same over here for funder B, but I'm going to get 2 different ones. Funders understand and have different appreciation for context depending on, are they local, therefore they've got a better understanding? Are they national? They have no understanding about your community and how rural it is or how urban it is. It depends on the type of context that you need to give them for what might be the perfect combination of data that helps a reviewer not be as much of an expert as you are in the need or the problem, but to feel adequately knowledgeable, a little bit more than dangerously knowledgeable. So we're going to want to have a combination that tells the best story, thinking and keeping in mind who will be my reviewer. They're probably more than dangerously knowledgeable about the topic matter itself, but we don't always know, unless it is a localized funder, that they're going to be an expert in our community. So we've got to help them really understand, like, for example, I'm in far, far, far upstate New York in the Thousand Islands region. Yes, where the dressing was first originated. Sometimes that helps people think about where it is. Has anyone ever heard of, I'm not saying you have to say that you've been here, but has anyone ever heard of the Thousand Islands region outside of the dressing? Quick Y for yes, N for no in the chat box. And again, I'm not offended if you haven't heard of it before. I'm used to it. I didn't grow up here. I love it here. It's beautiful. If you ever show up here for some reason, summer or winter, I'll buy you a cup of coffee. We can talk grants. Oh, yeah. No one has said yet that they had heard of it before. What if any of you were on my review panel for the grant that I was writing? You'd never heard of the region. You might be like, I mean, is it outside of New York City? I'm not real good with my New York geography. I live in, pick a state that is not New York. There's even New Yorkers that don't know where the Thousand Islands is. Very, very far upstate, north of Syracuse, end of Lake Ontario, as the St. Lawrence River starts. Literally on the Canadian border. But even you might say, oh, I'm really bad with maps and geography. I'm just not real sure. So what's the way that I can help you understand where we are before we even worry about what's our program design and how awesome will it be? So I might give some reference, like a little geographic, located at the mouth of Lake Ontario and the St. Lawrence River. I might say that. But maybe it's more important that you understand how rural it is and that it is at least a 25-minute drive to get to any sort of chain restaurant, to get to any sort of extracurricular, non-school-based academic success resources. In fact, actually, most of the time, if you're talking about it, it's actually more like 95 minutes to access that. And so I'm thinking, like, what would it sound like if I was trying to help somebody understand getting resources related to education for children? So I might talk about how there's no public transportation for 95% of the county, how there are no Ubers or Lyfts in 50% of the county. I might talk about how cold it gets when folks have to make the choice. Will they walk 22 miles in order to receive recovery support services? I need to give you things to think about and to have as reference that have nothing to do with your understanding of where geographically I am. Even maybe you opened up like a little Google window and you're like, where are the Thousand Islands? But even if you didn't do that, you now have a little bit more understanding about the rurality of the community that you didn't a few minutes ago. And it's okay that you still don't know exactly where it is in New York State, but you get that it's a rural community and that resources, therefore, are really dispersed and hard for people to get to. Maybe, in fact, that rural story made sense and related to some of you, but others are like, no, never lived anywhere that rural. That sounds like really far. I need to pick the data that helps give you context so that regardless of your individual experience as a reviewer, you've got enough of an understanding about where we are and what we're trying to do. So that when you come to the second of our key thing that is in all applications, we're going to find SMART objectives. SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. Writing SMART objectives, I talk about this a lot in webinars here at the Native Learning Center because it is such an important part of competitive grant applications, and it is not a natural writing style for many of us, myself included. It's not the natural way I write a sentence. Trying to get all of the right details in that are going to help answer as many journalistic questions in just one sentence that's not 5 lines long. SMART objectives help to answer for a reviewer who's learning about your work for the first time. Well, who is going to be attending that program? Or who's delivering that training? Who's being trained? What is it they're being trained in? Where is this happening? When in the calendar year is this taking place? How often does this happen? Is it like once a quarter? Is it once a month? You also want it to make sense and connect to the why. Why are you doing this? So the things you talked about in your need statement need to then connect in the dots to SMART objectives. If I just told you how far it is to get to resources and that there's no public transportation, the SMART objectives should help me to understand how are you going to provide this support or service without making transportation a barrier for those that you want to support? So our SMART objectives, I said, not the natural way that many of us get started. I can point you to lots of our Native Learning Center recordings if you want to dig more deeply into this, but I'm just going to flag it because it's a Grant Writing 101 class. This is a really big intermediate skill. Please do not feel pressured to know how to do this right away on day one. The best way to strengthen your SMART objectives as a skill is to practice writing them and asking others for feedback. If you read this sentence in the context of the application, what questions do you have? Ask others for support and for feedback. And quite frankly, if you are comfortable with AI, if you are allowed to use it related to your work, drafting a SMART objective and then asking the AI tool of your choice if there are any suggestions for improvement. Not a bad way to use it if you say that you don't have anyone that can give you feedback readily accessible. So our third item that I called out was, what does success look like? Now, I did not ask you how much money you wanted. I just asked you, what would you apply for? Let's say that I'm going to give you $500,000 each. That might be more than you need. But I'm going to give you, now forget the dollar amount. I'm going to give you exactly what you need for dollar amount, whether it's 5,000, 50,000, 500,000, or 5.5 million. It's exactly what you need. Could you type in the public chat for me, what would success look like? For that grant that you were imagining, when you typed in the public chat to me, what is it you would apply for funding for if you had your choice? Could do whatever you wanted. I was just willing to accept your application for whatever was your highest priority. Quick word, phrases. What does success look like for that project or program if you got all the money you asked for? What would change? What would success look like? What would the impact be? All right, Janessa, really nice and fast. New building and fully dedicated 4D and 4E services. Okay, that I'm going to be able to see the building and understand that the services are based there. I don't even know what the services are, and it's okay that I don't know because I'm like, well, they're going to take place in the building, whatever it is. You're going to give me the context. Nice quick phrase, like it. Gas cards and third-party rides for patients. Oh, it sounds like you probably have transportation barriers. Yep, I know a thing or two about that for groups. Okay, so that's what the success of what you're providing looks like. But one step past that, Veronica, it's that patients no longer report that transportation is a barrier. You've got fewer no-shows. You've got higher attendance rates for support groups or for meetings or for appointments, right? The impact, the success is actually a step bigger and higher than the provision of the gas cards, than the provision of those rides. It's about what is the impact? How does that help your patients? I would push you a step further to think about your success. That's great. Another new building and a fully equipped STEM curriculum as well as dedicated staff. Now, Janessa, I didn't ask you a follow-up question and I could have. How many people are going to benefit from that building? Because that's the question I have for Chelsea. Great. How many people in the community benefit from this new building, the fully equipped STEM curriculum, and the dedicated staff? Oh my gosh, Janessa, 1,000 people? Amazing. Wonderful. You want me to get super excited about what you're saying is your success. And I know you're doing this super fast and in a public chat box. So you didn't have time to like really think about what am I going to say? Youth participation and steadiness. Okay, Courtney, how many youth? Candace, youth services, prevention programs, activities. How many youth? It's not only about output. I would expect that you'll tell me lots of great things about the services you're doing, but help me to understand the scale and the scope of your awesome impact. Okay, Chelsea, approximately 30 students from each district we serve. Oh, see, but then I want to know the rest of the math. How many districts do you serve? Because now I understand from the way you said it that it's more than one. But now I'm like, I want to know, is it 2? Oh, it's 4. So now you're at 120 students. It's not that your numbers of success and impact have to be 1,000 plus, like Janessa has said. If you've got high touch programs saying something like 30 students in 4 of the districts, so all of our communities, that's still, the funders that fund in your space are going to understand how high touch those services are and get really excited about it. Oh, sorry, that was 4 communities. Chelsea was 7. Okay, so my math would actually be 210. This is what happens when I play with the chat live. Amazing, amazing impact stories, but like get me excited. It's like I'm an investor on Shark Tank. If you've ever watched that show with the entrepreneurial investors, what gets me excited? I want to see the impact you're going to create. So there's the technical, what can I see? What could I touch? What would you report that you paid for? And then there's the people, or there's the environment, or there's the animals, the bigger community things. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Get your reviewers excited. And that, whether you've got a short application or a big one, is present in all successful applications. So let's go back to that need statement. The need statement was in our list of common application elements. The need statement is where you would put that data. Remember, I said clear identification of need is one of the 3 things you'll find in all successful grant applications of different shapes and sizes. The way that we think about our need statement is first by thinking about our main point. This takes me back to like English classes of all grades and all levels when I talk about main point. And I don't know, I hope that that's okay for you, but that's what comes to mind for me. And I didn't used to like that exercise when I was thinking about essays and my different drafts. I was like, oh. And so it's ironic that that's what I talk about when it comes to grant applications. The reason it's so important to think about what is your main point. What is it that you're trying to get your reviewer to understand? Is that your grant makers are reading multiple applications, trying to make a decision about which 1 or 2 or 5 out of the very tall pile of applications is going to be funded. So there's a lot of information that they're digesting. How can you make it as easy as possible for them to digest and remember your work? There's a few things we can do. Focus on a main point. What is the big thing you want them to know about your need or your problem? The way I presented the 1,000 Islands to you, I wanted you to understand how far away appropriate resources are, how much of a transportation barrier there is to accessing these really far away resources. Could we talk about the poverty rate for the region? Unfortunately, absolutely. Could we talk about testing score as a way to highlight why these resources for students are needed? Yep, you betcha. Those are supporting things. But there's got to be something in my design for why I'm really focusing on how far away appropriate resources are. Maybe it's because I've got a distance learning program that I'm trying to bring in. Maybe it's because I think I've got the solution. Maybe it's that I want to actually open the very first thing in the region. It's going to play out later on in my application and my project description, but by setting a very clear stage of this is the most important thing I want you to know about my region that's an issue related to, I'm going to relate it to the community I'm talking about serving. In this case, it was a student example. I'm going to help make sure that you understand my community. And therefore, since you're an expert probably in education services, here's how we're going to do it differently. But I'm going to assume only that you're an expert as it relates to the mission area of the foundation, not to who we are and where we are and why we're awesome. I want it to be as clear as possible for you reading about us for the first time so that you could turn to another reviewer and say, oh, did you read this one? This is the one where instead of having kids drive 90 minutes or only be able to be on Zoom in order to get preparation support for testing, they're going to be able to have people come right to their school. All the schools in the district are going to be served this night. wow, that sounds really cool. Didn't remember any of the other details about it, but that's what they could parrot. You're like, all right, I did a nice job, right? They could parrot a quick version of the story on their own. Now, I have a favorite book that could help you think about how might you do just that? Because what I have described is what a colleague of mine, Tamsin Webster, refers to as the red thread. Actually, Tamsin is not the only one to talk about the red thread, but Tamsin does a beautiful job on LinkedIn, on YouTube, in her book. No pressure to buy the book. I'm not an affiliate. If you like books like I do, it's a really good book. Find your red thread. And it gives you a formula for how you pull through an idea to make it so that people can't wait to be part of that idea. You've got to get your reviewers excited. They're dangerously knowledgeable about the topics being funded, but not about you. You need them to be excited about funding you and how unique your idea is. So you don't want to clutter your application with things that don't support your main point. You want them to be able to give a real quick, great version of it, even if it's not the exact words. So this is a great book, and also all of her other content to help you think about that messaging. It also, as a sidebar, plays out across all other fundraising. So it's not only a grant-specific idea. If you find a way to address that red thread, that one main point, that storyline you're going to pull through your application, it could impact positively all of your fundraising for your tribal organization. Now, when we talk about not assuming reviewer knowledge, assuming is never a good idea. You want to think about what it feels like if you've ever been lost on a road trip. Or maybe it's not that you were really lost, but you're like, wait a second, dear GPS program, why did I just have to make a sharp left-hand turn? And the answer might be, oh, there's construction ahead, and I'm trying to help you as your GPS program to not get stuck in traffic for an hour. But in the moment, it's really jarring. You want to have your reviewers, your grant makers, feel like they're being carefully led on a journey. They understand how they're getting from point A to point B. To do that, when you're thinking about what is unique in your community, I gave you examples related to the Thousand Islands. So what is unique about the need? In my case, it was about the transportation barriers. What is unique that might be a barrier, it might be a hurdle, it might be a burden, it might be an issue. What might that look like in your community? You don't have to type it in the public chat, just think about it. And on the flip side, what's it going to look like if you successfully address that? I want to help the grant maker get from A, I've got these hurdles, to B, we have a solution. And they can see how they got from point A to point B with your guidance. When we think about what is unique to your idea, there's a lot about you as a tribal organization and all the awesome things that you do that are unique. We don't need to tell them all the unique things, all the special qualities that make you amazing. We want to tell them the things that are unique and awesome and special about us that help increase their understanding of our project or program, help increase their confidence that we are going to be able to do what we said we would, when we said we would, how we said we would. So I don't need to tell them all the unique things. I want to tell them the most relevant of the unique things. So that's where the story idea comes in. It is not only about the story of this particular response. It is about the story of the entire application, start to finish for whatever the grant maker has requested. So before you get too deep into writing, I want you to think about laying it out for yourself. What are the pieces that I have that will help me tell the best story? Different applications have different Structures might feel different and best for other types of stories. Foundations love individual stories, impact stories about individuals. I'm generalizing, but foundations love impact stories like that. Government entities tend to love more group impact stories. Tell us about the big thing that's happening, the bigger numbers, but individual stories are loved by foundations. But as you think about what that sounds like over the course of the entire application, your application from start to finish is one type of story. But there are individual types of stories that you can weave in to your bigger story of the application itself. It could be any of the 4 on the screen right now. Let me tell you a little bit about what each of these mean. So a client story, a community member story, a participant story, a patient story, all fit into this bucket. Stories about the people that are benefiting from the work you've done. How many of you have stories like that? At least one. Go ahead and let me know in the public chat, Y for yes, N for no. That might be a type of story that you have collected, you have permission to use. It's not going to fit into every grant application, but you're carrying it around as you're drafting. Would it fit here with this character count? Would it make sense to help answer this question here? Would it be an appropriate link if I have a video version of this story, because they've told me I can share a link to other resources? Maybe I want to share it to that 2-minute YouTube clip. Right? You're looking for where does it help to bolster your overall story. All right, so some of you have client stories. Maybe some of you have this other type of story, a donor story, someone who is helping to support the organization with in-kind donations, cash donations, other grant funding, donating backpacks, donating food, donating their time as a volunteer, something, they're giving you something to support your work. And so it's really helpful to hear why they choose to support. Some grant makers love to hear from others who are helping to support the work. Not necessarily directly talking to them, but they like to hear about it in your application. Let me know. I just put a delineator in the public chat. Y for yes, N for no. How many of you have that kind of story that you're aware of, might have permission to use, that you might consider in an application? You might say, Diane, I'm not sure we have any stories. They're going to be on a scavenger hunt after this for the next few weeks to look for stories. You're on a hunt, a mission to find different stories that you could use in applications if you don't have any of these. But don't worry, we still have 2 more to go. This is a great, I don't want to say fallback, because they really can be powerful. But sometimes you say, Diane, it's not possible for us to get stories. We don't have other donors. Okay. We don't have permission to ask the clients themselves. We're working with infants and toddlers. I'm like, oh, no, you're right. That might be awkward. And if you don't have, right, they can't tell you anything. And if their caregivers haven't been accessible or their parents, yeah, you're right. But what about the staff who are working with them and seeing their developmental improvements from the program? Are the staff able to, without giving away any identifying information, able to talk about the change in the impact they're seeing? It might be that you work in a domestic violence hotline or shelter situation. Patient care or client safety is paramount. And so you're not going to have permission to use individual stories. I suppose you could anonymize a name, but you're not using individual stories. Again, staff stories might be what are safe to use, talking about the impact that's been created, the change that has been initiated. How many of you think you might have the ability to use staff stories in your application? Y for yes, N for no. Put another delineator in. And then our last kind of story, again, they won't be in every application. You won't use them in every application, but they help to sometimes build our main point, get our reviewers excited. Our last kind is community story. These could be from collaborative partners. So maybe some of you talked about the school district, some of you talked broadly about the communities where you work. So who are the other collaborative organizations that you're partnering with, and what sort of stories do they have about how without your work in this program, none of this impact would have happened collaboratively. None of this impact would have happened. It could be that you get grant funding together. It might not have anything to do with the funding that is being received. You could be very independent as a funding approach. But how many of you think, we'll put one final delineator, how many of you think with a Y for yes or an N for no that you might have a community story that you could use in a grant application? All right, interesting. So I got a mix of Ys and Ns as I asked each one. I got the most collective Ys here when we just asked about community stories. But do you know what? When people are writing grant applications, they are most commonly telling me, I don't have a story. The reason they say that is that they're only thinking about patient, caregiver, client, community member. I like to show you these 4 different types of stories so that you really broaden your definition of what type of story might you add in answering and drawing out your narrative. What's going to help add? Because your compelling needs statement, it might be that it's really appropriate. What we're talking about is data. I'm not going to have the room to talk about a story at all in terms of impact, right? I'm really taking a very factual, very cut and dry approach to my needs statement. That might be what's appropriate for the grant maker. We're going to tell you the problem, we're going to talk about the population we're serving, and we're going to forecast to the outcome we will create. That could be it. And it could be that you are relying very heavily, again, in a very cut and dry way, on what is your primary data. You talked about it in the public chat, your Census Bureau data, etc., Department of Labor, etc. It might be that you could use a little bit of secondary data, some locally accepted information from a needs survey conducted by a United Way or a community college, data from your own client intake form. Great. That's very data driven. It might not be that you put a story into the needs statement. But if you have identified a story of any of those 4, client, the donor, the staff, the community, if you've identified one that you want to or you intend to use, think about the data that you're presenting and how that story is going to be aligned with it. Don't have it way off here on its own. Make it so that they feel like they're a connected part of the story. Make it so that the story, wherever it might fall in the application, is giving that local context and feels aligned with what does your funder care about? What do their guidelines tell you? Why would they care about that particular story? When we're thinking about our application, in particular, that needs statement is setting the stage, because your grant maker, you want them to know and understand we're experts in our community. We know the needs, we know the problems, we know the barriers, the burdens. Here's the proof that we know these things. It's not just our opinion. Here's the citable proof. So we're experts in this work. Dear grant maker, I can't wait to tell you about what we're going to do. I'm so excited to tell you what we're going to do. You want them bouncing in their seat, being so excited about what are they going to do? How are they going to address this? I can't wait to turn the page, digital or physical. I can't wait to turn the page and find out what they're going to do. So the details you share have to, across the entire application, start to tell that whole story. That's why I like to talk about red thread. They have to pull the red thread. So that across our entire application, we are sure we are consistent with our story building elements. Sidebar, little pro tip here. I've got it on the screen. The best way to ensure that you are consistent in your application storytelling is not to self-edit your work. Nope, shouldn't do it. We're not good editors for our own work. We don't see where we may have added a little extra erroneous detail that does not help but almost distracts. We might not see that. Someone who's reading it for the first time will. So whether they are one of the people you typed the initials for in the public chat earlier, or it's someone in your friend group, your family, maybe it's somebody else in the office that has nothing to do with the program or grants, great. Ask them to read it. Ask where they have questions. Ask where they have a sense of an inconsistency. Because what you're looking for put up a quick set of images. You're looking for, how well did you connect the dots? Anybody want to tell me real quick in the public chat? What are these 3 images of? Oh, yes, right. No, you're like, Diane, we don't need to type that. They're all butterflies. Yes, yes. But which of these 3 butterflies is clearest to you? That's actually what I would like to know. In the public chat, could you please type in number 1, 2, or 3? Which of the 3 images of the butterfly are clearest to you? This is sort of like that Brain Games TV show that I think is now maybe still on Netflix sometimes, but like, you're like, what's the trick here? They are all butterflies. It is very interesting to me that no one is picking number 1. Promise, it's a butterfly. No one's picking number 1. It's overly complex, and you're like, I cannot see that butterfly. Wait, let me look at that close. What? No, you're like, is that really going to work? I feel like there's going to be some extra dots. There was so much information on the screen that you're like, I can't see the butterfly. The interesting thing, and the point I want to make, that 2 and 3 are pretty evenly split, is that different people as reviewers see and understand your idea in different ways. So I love that we get equal responses across 2 and 3. They have different versions. Oh, Gwendolyn, this is the magic gold star word, simplicity. 2 and 3 have different ways that the butterflies are simply presented. It's okay that some of you like 2 and some of you like 3. But what does this actually teach us related to our grant applications and what I just told you about not self-editing? I'd love to let you have 2 people be fresh eyes before you submit, because they see the world in a slightly different way, and you're going to get nuances in feedback from both that will help you make the combined simplest butterfly. I know it's a little hokey with the connect the dots. I use that phrase when I talk, but that's the idea. Everybody sees and visualizes your program in a slightly different way. For some, what really might help is how you gave context. Here's my big primary data source, Annie E. Kids Count Census. And then I gave it some nice local data, some recent testing data from just our district that came from our school report card. It's just one quick example, but that might be what makes it the simplest butterfly for a particular reviewer. It might be that what makes it simplest for a different reviewer is that the language that's used in the funder guidelines and their headings that they used for the different sections has been used in your application. So not only does it feel like comfortable language from them because you mirrored their language, but it's also comfortable to them because they have what feels like mile markers on a road trip. They can see, where are we supposed to be? Oh, here's that information. I don't need to worry about, I can't find this piece of information that I'm supposed to review and judge. So that can be what makes it more comfortable and a simpler butterfly. So as we think about our applications and what the need statements look like, you're setting the stage. At a minimum, I know you're like, there's a lot of ways you can personalize everything I've said. At a minimum, please make sure that you properly cite all your data, because if your reviewer says according to whom, they might stop reading. If they don't know your sources, if they think it's your opinion, if they don't believe that you are the experts in this information, they might not continue. They don't have to continue. You want them to continue. Citing your data, not saying it has to be a footnote, usually it's in-text citation, is so important. Don't let them say according to whom. You want them to get to this next section, the section that's talking about our programs, our projects, what it is that we're going to do. We want them to know, what is our big, broad, intangible goal? We want them to want to know. Tell me all the details. Tell me everything. Don't leave anything out. Tell me everything. I want to know how these teachers are going to be trained, and I want to know how the curriculum is going to be delivered, and I want to know how many school districts, and I want to know how many kids. Tell me all this stuff. Give me the tangible, concrete, really specific things. You want them to want to read your SMART objectives. Now, I talked about SMART objectives a lot. I gave you the acronym. Here it is in a different visual if this is helpful to see instead when you look at your slides as a handout. Your SMART objectives are helping your reviewers to understand what is it that you're going to do with the money. What is it that is going to be successful about this, that they're going to be excited to invest in? Of these 5 elements on the screen, can you guess what is the most frequently overlooked? Don't worry, I won't make you guess. I won't make you hold on for too long. It is, of the 5, M. The measurable. What are we measuring? Now, if you think back to what I said were the 3 things we want to have in every grant application if it's going to be successful: clear identification of need, SMART objectives, talking about the M, and a definition of success. This slide right here connects the dots for those 2. If you're talking about what measurement you will do, what is it you will be able to report? How many students? What % of students? What number of seniors or elders in the community? How many patients? How many caregivers? Whatever it might be. If we're talking about the % change in terms of knowledge gain, a % change in terms of behavior change, what we're listing in our SMART objectives should be part of our big high-level definition of what does success look like. So everything I list that could be measurable in my I might have 3, 4, 5 different SMART objectives in my application. They should all point towards my big, broad definition of success, each and every one. SMART objectives, as I said before, very much an intermediate skill. No pressure to walk away from here today being like, that's great, I understand completely how to do that. Lots of additional, like I said, it's talked about a lot in some of our other webinar recordings here at the Native Learning Center. You're going to have all my contact information. In fact, we've got a SMART toolkit that's a free download on our website. I didn't think to give it to Brooke as a handout for the class today, I don't think. Oops. But you can download it for free at dhleonardconsulting.com. I'll put that web address in the chat box here in a minute. But SMART objectives take practice. So this is a team activity in particular for SMART objectives. Now, once we get through the writing work, done, right? No, budgets. Please don't save budgets for the end. Budgets by themselves tell your story. They have to tell the same story as your narrative. And by that, I don't mean only, well, how much are you asking for? And is that what the budget says? And is that what the narrative says? That's the super high level alignment that we're looking for. Yes, that's important. But we need to know, how much does this really cost us? Are we sure that we have proof for how we got to all these numbers? Then I can worry about putting it into the grant makers form. Then I can worry about putting it into the application. But your homework, and not necessarily yours, sometimes it's the colleagues in programs, sometimes it's the colleagues in finance. This is where that team concept is going to come in again. Knowing how much does it cost us in its entirety for this project or program, and where is all of the proof in how we got those numbers, is the storytelling information you need to complete the grant application. You're not going to provide all of that information in the detailed way you gather it to the grant maker. You're going to customize it to each and every grant maker, but it helps you to understand high-level questions that are what the grant maker want to know. What does your project budget look like? What sort of resources do you need in order to accomplish this work? Do you have any other funding sources? These are questions you can ask yourself up front that the grant maker wants to know the answers to. You want to answer these questions with your colleagues. You, as the one writing the grant, should not be designing a grant budget on your own. In a little vacuum of an environment, you need your colleagues so that everyone is prepared and agrees on the numbers because you're going to do such a good job, you get the grant. And you don't want to make it stressful for those who are implementing the grant by wondering how those numbers were arrived at. Have everybody involved up front. I guarantee that by asking questions about your budget, you're going to, when you ask, hey, can you tell me how we got this 25,000 number in the budget? You're going to learn details that can strengthen your tangible, specific information in your SMART objectives. You'll start to see alignment between your budget details and your SMART objectives and vice versa. Those are connecting your simple dots for your butterflies. Another way to think about it, when you read anything in your application related to budget, you should never want to make your reviewer reach for a calculator. Ever. I'm not saying that they're reaching for the calculator because they want to like double check your math, but the idea that you say, well, we're going to spend $8,812.80 on mileage, and I'm going to do that. Yeah, it's going to be reimbursed at 56 cents a mile. But if you don't tell your reviewers how many miles, they're going to want to reach for their calculator to know, well, wait a second, how many miles are we really funding? You made them reach for their calculator. You made them, quite frankly, do some algebra, either longhand or on the calculator. Don't make them do that. That will frustrate them. But my point is, when you're hearing the information, you might say, how would I know that? Well, you heard from a colleague what the mileage reimbursement rate was, and then maybe somebody in finance said, we're going to put in $8,812. You might say, I don't really love, can you just confirm that I did my math right? Like, did I do that equation right? Or you might feel confident in the algebra and do it yourself. But make sure you know every detail about how you got those budget numbers, and that you tell and show your grant maker in the appropriate structure. That's the final way. That's like at the very end of the application usually, and that's the final spot where you might go whoops and take your pen off the paper away from your connected dots. Don't let that happen. So your three big things: clear identification of need, SMART objectives, what does success look like? Those are our three things I want you to think about, regardless of what application you pick up next. Now, Brooke knows I literally can talk about grants all day. She's seen it more than once, but you don't have all day. And so I've answered some of your questions as we've gone along. So grateful for everybody being here with us today. I thank you. I know I went a minute over. I got super excited about budget. But if you have any additional questions, I'm going to keep an eye on the public chat, but you're also welcome to email me at any time. I've got my email on the screen. I'm also going to put two links in the chat box. The first is my LinkedIn link, in case that is your preferred way to ask follow-up questions. I get it. There's piles of stuff in your inbox. You might not need more, but anywhere on social media is totally fine. And the other thing I'm going to type in there super fast, because I mentioned that SMART Objectives free download. I've put the link to my website where you can go download that for free. I'm so sorry I didn't think to put that in as a handout for class today. But I'll keep an eye on this for questions. And in the meantime, Brooke, I send it back to you.
Yay! Thank you so much, Diane. This was an incredible, incredible webinar, and we had extremely great attendance. So pressure fully implied, folks. We still got over 40 people on the webinar. I have put the webinar feedback survey link into the chat, and I expect to see some feedback, please. It's anonymous. You don't have to worry about it being connected to your name or your email. It takes about 3 minutes to complete. Just lets us know at the Native Learning Center what's working well, what we can improve upon. We do share the feedback with our instructors, so it helps Diane too. And there's even a spot where you can suggest future webinar topics that we can try to get for you. So please, please, please complete that. It helps us, helps everybody involved the way the webinar helped you. We hope you can join us for our next one. That is actually going to be Grant Writing 102. So that'll be the next one. This will also be with Diane. This is going to be next Thursday on August 7th. So now that all of you are part of the learning platform, you'll just log in like you did today. You don't need to re-register. And you will see that green banner up at the top of the screen that says Grant Writing 102, and you will click again, and that is how you'll join. I have the webinar times posted to our homepage because I know we're all in different time zones, but it's going to be 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, 12 12 p.m. Mountain, 11 a.m. Pacific, and 10 a.m. Alaska. So I hope to see everybody back for Grant Writing 102. This webinar was recorded and we'll post that, but we encourage you to check out our other recorded webinars. They are on our YouTube channel, and that link for the Cathedra webinar archive is in the shared notes section for you. We encourage you to check out our upcoming training events. We post about them all the time to our various social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And if you are a podcast fan, we have an in-house produced podcast, the Hopathanga Native American podcast. We explore micro topics within tribal housing and self-determination. You can listen to that wherever you listen to your podcasts. And then if you like to watch the interviews with our guests, we do post that to our YouTube channel as well. But otherwise, that's it for today, y'all. So we hope you have a fantastic rest of the day. We look forward to connecting with you again really soon. And I'm going to post that webinar feedback survey link. I'm seeing a lot of love for Diane in the chat. Fantastic. Show her love in the feedback survey as well, please. We appreciate your time so much. And thank you again, Diane. We'll talk soon. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your day. I'm going to turn off the recording, but I am going to leave